Alright, before I show you guys the process for how I built this thing, let's go over some of the design philosophies that I had before I even started construction. So first thing you want to think about is the size of the cabinets. Start thinking about what is the largest component or appliance that you're going to be putting up in this thing. If you're just going to be putting clothes, maybe some plates and cups, you could probably get away with a really small overhead cabinet. For me, I decided to store my microwave on the upper cabinets, so I needed at least 14 inches in height and at least 15 or 14 in depth. So that's what really governed the size of cabinets. The main reason I went with extruded aluminum or 80/20 was for its extreme lightness and strength. I didn't want to add any more weight to the roof of the van and keep the center of gravity fairly low. So I used aluminum, and I also wanted to utilize the existing holes that were already on the body of the van. So believe it or not, this cabinet doesn't introduce any new holes into the walls of the van, which is awesome. The other tricky part of this build was allowing the cabinet to actually come down roughly 2 inches. So what that meant was I actually had to use a different size 80/20 member for the horizontal running along the roof. This one is a 20/40 size. I think it's a 1x2 member. That gave me the extra thickness I needed to bring the whole thing down and create this gap where I can run my LED strip on, so I can accent the roof slats we worked so hard to install. Probably one of the more difficult things about this build was finding a soft close hinge that would work with the 10 series 80/20 aluminum. I went through about 3 iterations trying to find which ones that would work, and had just coincidentally had the right dimensions to fit into the T-slot. The other piece of hardware that you want to be careful in choosing is the gas strut. I went with a Fornica brand off Amazon. This one's rated at 40 newtons or 8.8 pounds. These cabinet fronts are about 4 pounds, so you want to choose something that will allow it to drop and still close or touch the magnet catch, so you don't have to close it after you've pushed it down. So this one happens to work really nice. This one took about 2 iterations before I got it right. The other hard thing about this build was finding the correct cabinet catch to work with the 80/20 aluminum. I wanted to maintain maximum opening size on the cabinet front, so I didn't want anything popping out the front here. So I actually ended up using some heavy duty or rare earth magnets, and just used adhesive 3M tape that came with it and put it on the front here of the extruded aluminum, and then I put one up top on the cabinet itself, so when this thing goes down it actually catches and has about 20 pounds of pull to get this thing out. So I'm going to see how this works out for now. I may end up using stronger magnets in the future. I'm going to leave the ends open here for some time. I still need to finish out the inside of the cabinet. I'm not quite sure if I want to run the headliner horizontal across to the wall and bring it back down, or if I want to build some sort of 1/4 inch plywood backing. So I'll let you guys know in a future video what I do there. The other design consideration that you want to make when you're laying out or designing your cabinet is how far forward do you want the cabinets and how many you want on that side. So for me, I went with 4 cabinets, a little bit larger than the typical size that you're used to seeing, and I wanted to leave a little section on the end here open, just so I could, when I have my bed platform set up, I could either sit up straight or just lean against this wall and look out if I need to, or stand here and not worry about hitting my head on the cabinets. And that's the other factor you want to consider, is how low are you gonna be designing your cabinet to. If you're fairly short like me, 5'7", I wanted to be able to have at least a line of sight into the cabinet without having to tippy toe to look inside and get whatever belongings I need. The other thing you want to take into consideration is if you're going to have your cabinet way forward like I do, it's almost to the front of the cab area here. The roof of the Transit, so specifically for the Ford Transit, curves down way earlier than, let's say, like a Sprinter or a ProMaster. So you need to take that into consideration. So what I had to do is actually lower my ceiling almost 2 inches to have this thing further out than usual, further forward than usual. You'll see some people have their cabinets actually slope down and follow the contour of that roof. I didn't want to do that, so purely for aesthetic reasons, I lowered my cabinet so I could scoot it forward as much as possible and have this kind of line of the cabinet align with the base cabinets below in the future. So keep that in mind. The cargo area does taper from the back to the front, meaning the width in the back here is actually wider than the width in the front. So you can see that if we look underneath, this gap right here actually gets smaller as we move forward. And over here you got about 1/4 of an inch left at the end, compared to in the back where you have about 1 inch. So keep that in mind. Alright, I think that's just about all the design considerations that you need to make if you decide to follow this route. The extruded aluminum is very easy to work with. You just got to make sure that you have the right blade on your miter saw. You want to make sure you have a aluminum specific blade when you cut it so that it's a nice crisp cut. If I had a wood shop, I'd probably build this out of wood, but pretty happy how it turned out. Let's take a look at the process, and I'll try to narrate some of the shots. I recommend making a little mock-up like this. You can bring into the store and test fit some of the hardware you plan to use. This is how I originally planned to install the upper member, but the length was too long, and so I had to figure out a different way, and I didn't want to cut it. For this T-nut hardware, you can lock it into place by sticking a screwdriver in it and twisting it. I also explored using an angle bracket to install this member, but I ended up actually just using some variation of this slide-in T-nut and washer combination to make it work. Here's that modified version I just mentioned. This allowed me to push the bolts through the backing on the roof and fasten it using a bolt and a washer. I gave myself just enough space here so I could access the bolt with a ratcheting wrench. These cabinet faces were only $6 from IKEA, so I couldn't really say no. I'll link to that down below. Like I mentioned, we're going to be using the existing holes on the van body using plus nuts. This is 1/4 by 20 in size, and we're going to modify it because you can see here it doesn't quite fit. This is the tool you're going to need to do this correctly. To get the plus nut to fit, we're going to use a set of pliers to just ever so slightly push the bulb back into the body of the plus nut and get it into the existing hole. You don't have that much tolerance when installing this horizontal member onto the body of the van, so be careful and measure twice. Make sure you create a thermal barrier between the body of the van and the aluminum cabinet. I used a neoprene sheet to do this and adhered it using 3M90. And of course, don't forget to preload your 80/20 aluminum, or else you're not going to have a good time taking it all apart when it's already put together. Use a speed square to ensure all of your angles are at 90 degrees, and the rest of the process is fairly straightforward. Here's a quick look at how I wired the puck lights underneath the cabinets. You can see I ran one cable going all the way through the cavity here, tucked it into the aluminum. Each one of those cables has a positive and a negative, and I use the blue connectors to tap into those positive and negative wires and tie into the puck light. So fairly simple process, and makes for a really clean job once I get it all tucked in. Alright, I hope this video was informative and helps you decide whether to go with a 80/20 aluminum cabinet or a traditional wood structure cabinet. And as always, you can find links to the products I use in the description below. And I appreciate you guys watching. I want to say thank you to the over 1,000 subscribers who decided to follow along. Really appreciate you guys, and I try to get to each and every one of your comments. Stay tuned for the next video. We're going to try and tackle some more of the electrical system and create an electrical closet and start planning out the base cabinets right underneath here. So thanks again.